You might have thought that we have control over all the orbits, all the satellites, all the debris circling the Earth. Well, think again, because after watching this video, you'll realize that the space above our heads might not be as empty as we've been told. Hello everyone, welcome to UFO Section 51. I'm Dazjik, and it's always a pleasure to welcome you to the channel dedicated to UFOs and the paranormal on YouTube. Welcome to you all. Thanks again for your likes, for sharing the previous videos, and welcome as well to all the new subscribers who have just joined us recently. In today's video, we're going to take things up a notch and head into space, more specifically into Earth's orbit, where you'll see that things are happening there too. In a recent News Nation video, journalist Ross Coulter discussed a rather disturbing theory developed by astrophysicist Beatriz Villarroel. This incredible theory suggests that the US government is fully aware of the presence of mysterious objects that are constantly orbiting the Earth in low Earth orbit, objects that have been regularly observed and tracked for a long time by organizations like NASA or other, more secretive agencies. And that's not all. Beatriz Villarroel claims that even before the launch of Sputnik in 1957, there were already hundreds of thousands of artificial objects in low Earth orbit, whose origins remain completely unexplained. So, what is really happening in our skies? And what if the space above our heads isn't as empty as we've been told? It's important to know that Dr. Beatriz Villarroel isn't just a self-proclaimed ufologist or some random internet influencer. No, she's actually a recognized scientist, an astrophysicist and astronomy researcher at the Nordic Institute of Theoretical Physics. She works on so-called transient phenomena, that is, points of light, objects that mysteriously appear and disappear on old astronomical photographic plates. Her job is to go through all these photographic records of space. And according to her, as reported by journalist Ross Coulter in a new video on News Nation, the US government is fully aware of the presence of these objects in low Earth orbit. These objects are reportedly being tracked using radars, telescopes, and military sensors. In short, there is something up there, and that something isn't just space debris. And what makes these statements even more disturbing is that she claims that long before the space age, so before the Sputnik era, before modern satellites, there were already artificial objects that appeared to be in orbit around our planet.
Beatriz figured out that there was possibly anomalous artificial objects in geostationary orbit before the first human satellite was by looking at old glass plate photographic slides and showing that objects disappeared from one plate to another in that pre-1957 period. And she was able to confirm that the reflectivity disappeared when they were in the shadow. So it does appear that certainly we can say in the 1950s, before humans first sent objects into space, there were artificial specular objects in geostationary orbit. Unfortunately, the complexity of looking for objects in the current situation where we have thousands of objects, hundreds of thousands of objects in space, and moreover an enormous amount of space junk, it's no longer possible to actually specifically single out whether any of those objects are those anomalous objects that Beatriz was talking about from the 1950s. I suspect, though, that the United States, with its extraordinary space-based cameras and observatories, could detect these objects, and I strongly suspect, I've had indications as such from sources recently, that the United States knows full well what it is in geostationary orbit. And I'm intrigued as to the possibility, as to whether there is a connection between, for example, some of the UAPs that we're seeing on this planet that appear to be coming down from orbit periodically, maybe monitoring nuclear sites and then heading back up again. Is there, as my friend Patrick Jackson has speculated, some kind of global planetary defense mechanism or observation system did somebody or something install some kind of artificial planetary monitoring system with a large number? I think Beatrice talked about hundreds of thousands of objects in geostationary orbit. Let's just make it on the record that at the moment, nobody has provided any convincing rebuttal to Beatrice's quite stunning paper. And also note, it really hasn't had much coverage anywhere in mainstream media. And it's why I get peeved that so much attention is being given to the highly flimsy evidence of anything anomalous involving 3I Atlas, when Dr. Beatriz Villarroel, has in fact found something quite extraordinary in geostationary orbit. Her paper is going through peer review right now. I sincerely hope it passes peer review and that we get an answer as to whether or not the objects that she's talking about were and indeed are anomalous.
September 2024, the James Webb Space Telescope detected a huge object some 10 light-years from Earth, and we're on its trajectory. What if our past held the key to our future? For millennia, ancient tales have spoken of the Anunnaki, mysterious beings who shaped humanity before disappearing. An unknown object, regularly changing trajectory and seemingly heading inexorably towards Earth, and some believe it heralds their return. Are they the Anunnaki, or a completely different extraterrestrial race? Will they come as enlightened guides or ruthless conquerors? Through a fascinating analysis blending mythology, science, and ufology, this book explores the possible scenarios of an imminent contact that could turn our destiny upside down. Are you ready for first contact?
Let's talk about your projects. The Vasco project. Can you explain it to me, please?
So, the Vanishing and Appearing Sources During a Century of Observation project, it started with a search for vanishing stars in 2016. So we started with the idea of that one could look for some objects that, let's say some star that is there in old images, and then one day they vanish, because we hope to see some kind of super advanced civilization that just would go and kill off a star or turn it into a black hole or something like that. We never found those things, but we found something super interesting that was different, and that we found like some images where you can see multiple objects that look like star appearing and vanishing within half an hour. Now, that was something we didn't expect to see, and that was something also that we are still working with, because when you work with the Vasco project, the main thing is that we use plates from the early 1950s when there were no satellites in the sky. This is like it's like, imagine you have a sky that is completely clean from all human contamination, no space debris, because today you have like millions of pieces that are blinking pieces of space debris. And you have so much of garbage outside the Earth. While if you go back to these early images, it was clean.
So the very first human object in space was the Russian Sputnik satellite. That was 1957, am I right?
Yes.
So before that, there wouldn't have been any artificial human objects in space, correct?
Exactly, unless there were some black programs that they will not tell us about.
And what have you found? Obviously, the slides that you're talking about, these are glass plate slides. What observatory slides were you using?
So we were using glass, or like digitized glass plates. So they have actually digitized all these images, or not all, many of them, from the Palomar Observatory, which is in California. So
that's on the west coast of the United States.
Exactly. And so we have used those, and we compare them to Pan-STARRS, which is from 2013 and 2015, these 10 years ago. And we compared the images of the sky, and we looked for, while we were looking for vanishing stars, suddenly one day, and this actually, as a fun thing, this happened exactly the same week as the pandemic started in Europe, that I found this image of 9 stars that were there on the 12th of April 1950, and that were not there again and couldn't be seen there half an hour earlier either.
So some of these slides were taken within half an hour of each other. That's the really useful thing. You can actually show a period of time where a bright object or objects were in the sky, somewhere in space above our planet, visible to a telescope, and then half an hour later they weren't there.
It looks like that, and we want to know whether this is a real observation. Because one thing that people tell us is like, oh, but maybe these are just some kind of plate defects. But when you think about plate defects, I mean, a defect, it's something random, that kind of a random thing that happens on the plate, that maybe in one case you will see something that looks like a star. But what we do is that we actually measure the brightness profiles of these objects, and we compare them to the real stars in the field. And what you see on the 9 stars, these 9 transients, is that their brightness profiles is identical of the real stars in the field of that have the same intensities as these stars.
So what does that mean? Why is that relevant? Why is it?
I think these are no plate defects. That's what I think.
So a plate defect would have a different brightness profile. It'd presumably be a lot brighter.
Random shapes and maybe different brightness profiles, be like either much, let's say, wobblier, or plate defects also strings and streaks, and anything is a random thing. I wouldn't expect it to look identical to stars. So that's why I think these are real observations.
So you call these transients. So they're essentially transients because they're objects that are appearing on a slide in one exposure, but they're not there in another.
Exactly. And if you would, let's say, if you would think that what you're seeing is some kind of asteroid, then the weird thing is that, let's say, if you would have an asteroid that moves so fast that it's there in one image and not the other, it wouldn't leave a point source that looks like a star. It would leave a streak as it moves. And the same with meteors.
So these were stationary objects. They're not moving.
Whatever we see looks like indeed stationary objects that are far away from us.
Okay. So obviously what you and I are really interested in is technosignatures, the possibility that these might be craft or maybe some kind of Dyson sphere, something that's emblematic of a technologically advanced civilization. Maybe a spacecraft hovering in space somewhere, possibly in orbit. How do you delineate between that extreme possibility of a non-human intelligence and other natural explanations? What are the natural explanations that, as an astronomer, you have to take into account to consider our possible explanations?
So we have taken all kind of natural explanations into account and looked at it, and there's no natural explanation.
So, does all of this match up with the official data? It seems that yes, at least in part. The ARO report, the American agency in charge of investigating UAPs, or UFOs as we say in French, even mentions several dozen cases observed at altitudes above 100 kilometers. In other words, in space. It's already quite something that this agency, which is generally known for covering up the truth when it comes to UFOs, is confirming this information. We're talking about unidentified objects moving in the orbital zone, that is, where only our satellites and some debris should be found. Yet, some of these phenomena have had no satisfactory explanation. Of course, in most cases, skeptics point out that it could be balloons, debris, pieces of rocket, or even detection errors. But then, why is there always a portion that remains completely unexplained? That's where one of the most fascinating stories in ufology comes in my opinion, the famous Black Knight, or the Black Knight satellite. You might be familiar with this myth. Since the 1950s, in fact, rumors have been circulating that a mysterious satellite of unknown origin has been orbiting the Earth for thousands of years, about 13,000 years. Some claim that it was detected well before the modern space age, like some kind of extraterrestrial sentinel that has always been watching us. I have to admit, this myth is often linked to the conspiracy theory sphere, and I hope that just talking about it in this video doesn't automatically make us conspiracy theorists. But here's the thing, the problem is that it once again allows the most skeptical people to shut down the debate about this topic very quickly. So, according to everyone who has tried to analyze this myth objectively, the origin of the Black Knight legend supposedly comes from repetitive extraterrestrial natural radio emissions that were allegedly heard during Nikola Tesla's radio experiments in 1899, or from long-delayed echoes first heard by amateur radio operator Jørgen Hals in Oslo, Norway, in 1928. What's a bit ironic about this whole story is that those who try to debunk the myth also tend to rely a little too quickly on assumptions and on the principle of, "Trust me, I know more about this than you do." Unfortunately for the skeptics, in the 1990s, there were actually images taken by the Space Shuttle STS-88 that reignited the myth. In those images, you can indeed see a dark, angular object that appears to be floating above the Earth. From that point on, for UFO enthusiasts, there was no doubt it was the Black Knight. But NASA immediately responded that it was simply a thermal blanket lost during a spacewalk. But again, we know how it goes with NASA. How many former NASA engineers have regularly claimed for decades that the space agency has made a habit of editing certain photos before releasing them to the public, in order to hide anomalies observed both on the moon and in space? As always, the truth is very complicated. The Black Knight, just space debris, or a real ancient extraterrestrial craft forgotten in Earth's orbit, silently passing over us for centuries? The mystery remains unsolved to this day. And what should we make of the Big Show incident in 1964? On September 14, 1964, while leading a unit of 100 men, Dr. Jacobs, then an officer in the U.S. Air Force, was sent to Big Sur, California, to photograph the launch of the Atlas D missile from Vandenberg Air Force Base using high-speed instrumentation. During his testimony, much later at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., he stated, "I took part in a cover-up operation by the U.S. Air Force. At about 257 kilometers altitude, our rocket was suddenly joined by an unknown craft shaped like a flying saucer. The UFO emitted 4 beams of light onto our warhead, which knocked it off course and caused it to fall back to Earth, resulting in the failure of the launch mission and the destruction of the Atlas missile." Jacobs was ordered to keep quiet, which he did throughout his entire military career. And the numerous sightings made by American astronauts during their missions in Earth's orbit. Are we going to talk about that too? During the first space missions, like Mercury or Apollo, astronauts such as Gordon Cooper, Edgar Mitchell, or even James McDivitt reported seeing strange craft moving above the Earth at impossible speeds. So, if these objects really exist, what could be the possible explanations? One initial attempt at an explanation is that they could be natural phenomena. Meteors, cosmic dust, debris entering temporary orbit. That can definitely happen. A second hypothesis, maybe they're human-made debris. It's estimated that there are already hundreds of thousands of pieces of metal, bolts, antennas floating above our heads. Maybe some of these mysterious objects are just poorly catalogued debris. Earth's orbit has become a real trash heap, so much so that some companies are even considering new satellites designed to collect this debris. Yes, you heard right, space garbage collectors. A brand new job. But the job is pretty risky, because in space, objects move at the speed of a bullet. In space, everything gets complicated really fast. Third hypothesis, secret technologies. Maybe these are classified military satellites, invisible to the public, known only to certain governments. But then, how could we explain that there are hundreds of thousands of them? That wouldn't be technically possible. If there were that many, it would be very hard to keep them hidden from the public. Is this third hypothesis really realistic? Fourth and final hypothesis, maybe a non-human origin. And here, we're opening the door to something much more unsettling. What if some of these objects weren't made by us? Probes, observers, technology that's far ahead of ours. Nothing is impossible in this world. But one thing is certain, even space agencies admit that some of these sightings have no definitive explanation. So if we accept that these objects are really out there, it raises a series of mind-boggling questions. Why are they up there? Are they watching us? Are they dangerous for our satellites? For the International Space Station? For our communications? Are they even capable, for example, of disrupting our own telecommunications on Earth? And what if the Black Knight really has existed for millennia? Has there already been secret contact between it and us? If so, what was the outcome? And is it potentially dangerous to make contact with this mysterious object? And why, by the way, is the subject of the Black Knight always systematically buried or made fun of? And above all, once again, what does it say about us, about our place in the universe, if an unknown intelligence is already lurking just above our heads? The history of ufology is full of fascinating stories. caught between partial truths, disinformation, and mysteries that have never been solved. But one thing is certain, our sky, and even the space around Earth, is far from having revealed all its secrets. Tell me, what do you think? Does the Black Knight really exist? Are we being kept in the dark about these mysterious objects in orbit? What are they capable of? Are they being guided by some form of intelligence? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe so you don't miss the next videos, and above all, stay curious because the story is far from over. This was Dose Geek on UFO Section 51. Thank you for sticking around until the end of this video. Until the next video, sending you big hugs. Keep your eyes on the sky, stay alert, stay awake. Longue vie et prospérité.